The billionaire invited his assistant as a joke, but when she arrived looking like a goddess, he regretted everything. You can't be serious about bringing her to the gala. Jackson Cole Brenner stood in the doorway of Ethan Caldwell's penthouse office, watching his best friend pace behind the massive oak desk. Outside the glass walls, Manhattan's skyline stretched toward the Hudson River. But Ethan wasn't admiring the view. Why not? Ethan shrugged, loosening his Italian silk tie. She's my assistant. It's perfectly reasonable. Reasonable? You just spent 20 minutes complaining that every woman in New York has turned you down. Now you want to invite Lila Bennett. Ethan stopped pacing and faced his CFO. At 34, he had the kind of confident swagger that came from never being told no until today. 3 influencers, 2 CEOs, and 1 congressman's daughter had all declined his invitation to the Manhattan Tech Foundation Gala. The annual charity event was only 2 weeks away, and Ethan Caldwell never attended social functions alone. Look at it this way, Ethan said, settling into his leather chair. I bring Lila. Everyone sees how generous I am to my employees, and I don't have to worry about some gold digger trying to get her hooks into me. Jackson crossed his arms. And what happens to Lila when she realizes she's completely out of her depth at the St. Regis? Those people will eat her alive. That's not my problem. Ethan picked up his phone, scrolling through emails. Besides, maybe it'll be good for her. When will she ever get another chance to see how the other half lives? The office door opened, and Lila Bennett entered, carrying a stack of reports. She wore her usual uniform, a shapeless navy cardigan over a white blouse, her auburn hair pulled back in a tight bun, thick-rimmed glasses sliding down her nose. At 27, she moved through the world like someone trying not to be noticed. Your 3 call wants to reschedule, Lila said, placing the papers on Ethan's desk without making eye contact. The Tokyo team wants to discuss the contract revisions tomorrow morning instead of tonight. Fine. Ethan barely glanced up. Actually, Lila, perfect timing. I have a proposition for you. Jackson cleared his throat. Ethan, maybe we should. The Manhattan Tech Foundation Gala is in 2 weeks, Ethan continued, ignoring Jackson's warning look. I'd like you to accompany me as my guest. Lila's hand froze halfway to adjusting her glasses. Excuse me? The gala? You know, the charity event I've been talking about for months. Formal attire, networking with the city's business leaders, 5-course dinner at the St. Regis. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her reaction. I think it would be a valuable experience for someone in your position. I don't understand. Why would you want me there? Why not? You've been working hard lately. Consider it a reward for your dedication. The words tasted bitter in Ethan's mouth, but he kept his expression neutral. Plus, there might be some important people there who could be useful for your career advancement, if you know what I mean. Lila's eyes widened behind her glasses. In 2 years of working as Ethan's assistant, he'd never mentioned anything about advancing her career. She made decent money, but between her rent and sending money home to help her younger brother Mason through law school, she barely had enough left over for basic necessities, let alone the kind of formal wear expected at New York's most exclusive social event. I'm not sure I have anything appropriate to wear, Lila said quietly. I'm sure you'll figure something out. Ethan waved dismissively. The gala is on Saturday the 15th. I'll have a car pick you up at 7. Jackson shifted uncomfortably. Ethan, maybe Lila needs more time to think about. Actually, Lila interrupted, I'd be honored to attend with you, Mr. Caldwell. Her voice was calm, but inside something clenched. The moment the words left her mouth, a dozen doubts screamed beneath her composed surface. Was she doing this for her future, or out of sheer defiance to a man who rarely saw her as more than a walking to-do list? She'd swallowed pride before, but this felt different, like volunteering to walk onto a stage blindfolded, knowing the spotlight could either reveal her or burn her alive. The words surprised even her, but the hint about career advancement had struck the right nerve. Lila had been stuck in the same position for 2 years, watching less qualified people get promoted, while she quietly handled increasingly complex responsibilities. Just a week ago, she'd been rejected for a senior analyst position at a mid-sized firm, despite acing every interview round. The rejection email had been curt. We've selected a candidate with more public-facing experience. No mention of her skills, only a reminder that sometimes perception outweighed substance. It had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. If attending one evening event could change her trajectory, she'd find a way to make it work. Excellent. Ethan smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. I'll have my driver coordinate with you about pickup times. After Lila left with her stack of reports, Jackson remained in the doorway. You know, she thinks this is about a promotion. Maybe it is. Ethan returned to his emails. If she can handle herself at the gala without embarrassing me, I might consider it. And if she can't, Ethan shrugged, then she'll learn a valuable lesson about staying in her lane. Jackson shook his head. Sometimes I wonder how we've been friends for 15 years. Because I pay you well and you look good in a tux, Ethan replied without looking up. But as Jackson left, Ethan found himself staring out at the Manhattan skyline, wondering why the supposed victory felt so hollow. In 2 weeks, he'd have his date for the gala, and Lila Bennett would learn exactly where she stood in his world. It was perfect. So why did he feel like he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life? 2 floors down, Leela sat at her desk, trying to focus on scheduling Ethan's meetings for the following week, but her mind kept drifting to the gala invitation. She'd attended events like this before, in another life, when her family name opened doors and her trust fund could buy any dress she wanted. That was before everything collapsed, before her father's business partner vanished with half their assets, before she fled to New York with nothing but her pride and a fierce determination to succeed on her own. Ethan Caldwell had no idea who she really was, and Lila intended to keep it that way. But for one night, just one night, maybe she could remember what it felt like to belong in that world again, even if it was only pretend. Lila stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror of her small Soho apartment. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, elegant, confident, beautiful. The red silk dress hugged her curves perfectly, its deep V neckline and thigh-high slit a world away from her usual conservative office clothes. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and professional makeup had transformed her features into something nearly ethereal. Around her neck hung her grandmother's emerald necklace, the only piece of jewelry she'd kept from her old life. The stones caught the light as she moved, a reminder of who she used to be before she became Ethan Caldwell's invisible assistant. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mason. "Knock them dead tonight, sis. Dad would be proud." Lila's throat tightened. Their father had built an empire from nothing, teaching his children that respect was earned, not given. He'd be horrified to know his daughter was attending a gala with a man who treated her like a background fixture. But he'd also taught her to face a challenge head-on. And maybe, just maybe, this night could be about reclaiming something, not just enduring it. But Ethan had hinted at a promotion. 2 years of loyal work deserved some form of recognition, didn't it? Another text arrived, this one from Ethan's driver. Arriving in 5 minutes. Lila grabbed her small clutch purse and took one last look in the mirror. Tonight, she wasn't Lila Bennett, the overworked assistant who ate lunch at her desk and stayed late without complaint. Tonight, she was Lila Noel Bennett Hartwell, daughter of one of Central America's most powerful business dynasties, even if only she remembered it. At the St. Regis Hotel, Ethan adjusted his bow tie and checked his Rolex. 7:15. Where was she? He had expected Lila to arrive flustered and clearly out of her depth, giving him the perfect excuse to network all evening while she quietly occupied a seat at their table. The grand ballroom buzzed with New York's elite. Tech magnates mingled with senators, while socialites in couture gowns posed for the flashing cameras. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over the crowd, and the soft melodies of a string quartet floated through the air. "She's probably having second thoughts," Jackson said, appearing at Ethan's side with 2 glasses of champagne. "Smart woman. She'll be here." Ethan checked his phone. No messages. "She wants that promotion too badly to back out now." "About that, what promotion exactly are you offering her?" Ethan shrugged. "I'll think of something. Maybe executive project liaison or special operations coordinator. Something impressive sounding that doesn't actually mean anything." Jackson was about to reply when the ballroom went quiet. Ethan looked up, and his world tilted off its axis. Lila Bennett stood in the doorway like something from a dream. The red dress shimmered against her fair skin, and her auburn hair caught the chandelier light like flame. But it wasn't just her appearance that stunned him. It was her presence. The uncertain posture and timid glances were gone. This woman commanded attention. "Is that really her?" Jackson whispered. Ethan couldn't answer. He was too busy staring at the emerald necklace around Lila's neck. He'd seen those jewels before, in media features, society columns. The Bennett heirlooms worn by the powerful matriarchs of one of Central America's most dominant business empires. His assistant, his seemingly invisible assistant, was Lila Bennett Hartwell. And in that instant something shifted. He'd invited her as a spectacle, but she had transformed it into a revelation. Every pair of eyes in the room tracked her steps, not out of pity, not with mockery, but awe. The plan to make her look out of place had failed spectacularly. She didn't look like someone pretending. She looked like someone who'd never left this world. The crowd began to murmur as Lila glided into the room. Heads turned, whispers grew, and Ethan caught fragmented speculation. Who is she? Absolutely stunning. Ethan Caldwell always did have a taste for elegance. Lila approached their table with the composure of someone born to this world. When she smiled at Ethan, he forgot how to breathe. "Good evening, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice carrying a faint accent he'd never picked up on before. "I hope I'm not too late." "Not at all," Ethan managed, standing to pull out her chair. His hands were visibly trembling. "You look incredible." "Thank you." Lila eased into her seat, accepting the champagne flute Jackson offered with a graceful nod. "This is quite an event. The decor is beautiful." As if her arrival had been a signal, guests began making their way to their table. Ethan watched, dumbfounded, as Lila transitioned seamlessly between English, Spanish, and French, discussing international policy with a hedge fund director, architectural theory with the city's planning head, and environmental tech with a green startup founder. She wasn't just managing, she was thriving. "How do you know so much about energy reform in Panama?" asked Victoria Stein, wife of the state attorney general. Lila smiled. "My family has ongoing investments throughout the region." "You learn to stay current with policies that affect trade." Ethan nearly dropped his glass. Family investments. The Bennett legacy spanned shipping, finance, and emerging technologies in over 10 countries. Lila wasn't just rich, she was elite. "Would you like to dance?" he heard himself ask as the quartet began a waltz. "I'd love to." On the dance floor, with her hand in his and her perfume drifting softly between them, Ethan felt something entirely new. Not just attraction, though she was stunning, but admiration, even respect. "You're full of surprises," he murmured as they moved together. "Everyone is if you take the time to look." Her eyes met his, and for that moment, Ethan forgot the setup, the power play, the joke. They were just two people, dancing beneath chandeliers, suspended in something he couldn't name. "Lila." "Ethan." A booming voice broke through the moment. James Pendleton, CEO of Pendleton Systems, clapped Ethan on the back. "You've been holding out on us? Who's the stunning mystery woman?" The moment shattered. Ethan was reminded of the room, the spectators, the performance. His colleagues were watching, their wives casting assessing glances at Lila. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan said, guiding Lila off the dance floor, "I'd like to introduce my guest for the evening." "Your guest?" Pendleton's wife Clarissa gave Lila a sweeping look. "And how do you two know each other?" Ethan felt Lila stiffen beside him. This was the moment he'd prepared for, the punchline to his joke. The reveal. He could feel Jackson's eyes on him across the ballroom, shaking his head in warning. But then Ethan looked at Lila, dignified, glowing, calm despite the ambush, and something inside him twisted. She trusted him. She'd accepted his invitation, thinking it was sincere, hopeful for her career. "We work together," Ethan said finally. "Work together?" Pendleton leaned in with curiosity. "What field are you in, my dear?" "I'm Mr. Caldwell's assistant," Lila said quietly, her chin lifting just slightly. The group exchanged glances. Ethan could almost see the conclusions forming in their minds. The billionaire and his secretary. How deliciously scandalous. "Well," Clarissa Pendleton said with a tight smile, "that's interesting." Ethan felt the weight of their judgment, saw the way they looked at Lila like she was a novelty, not the brilliant woman he had just watched command a room full of industry leaders. The same resentment that had prompted him to invite her in the first place now turned toward them. But instead of defending her, he heard himself laugh. "Actually," Ethan said, the words slipping out before he could stop them, "there's something you should know about tonight." Lila's hand found his arm, her grip suddenly firm, almost pleading. "Ethan, please." But it was already too late. The cruel satisfaction in his tone, the way the group leaned in for more, it was enough. Lila understood. She'd been set up and everyone was about to hear the punchline. "You want to know the truth?" Ethan continued, his voice rising just enough to draw the attention of New York's elite around them. "She's my assistant. I brought her as a joke, wanted to see how the help would handle a real social event." The moment froze, crystallized in horror. Every breath felt like fire in Lila's throat. The golden light of the chandeliers, once warm, now seemed to mock her. Her heart pounded in her ears as her world spun, not from the humiliation but from the betrayal. The words hit like venom. Lila felt her face flush, all the color draining from her skin. Expressions shifted around her, from polite interest to barely contained ridicule. Clarissa Pendleton covered her mouth, hiding a smirk. James Pendleton chuckled beside her. "Though I have to admit," Ethan added, his voice slick with mockery, "she cleans up better than expected." Lila's world crumbled, not because of the public embarrassment. She had faced worse when her family's fall from grace had made global headlines, but because for one naive moment she had hoped Ethan Caldwell might have actually seen her. "Excuse me," Lila said quietly, her voice composed despite the tremble in her fingers. She turned and walked away, head held high, even as the murmurs began behind her. The red dress that had made her feel powerful now felt like a disguise, a cruel costume worn by a woman foolish enough to believe she belonged. Each step toward the lobby felt heavier than the last, her heels striking the marble like echoes of heartbreak. Behind her, laughter returned, sharper now, edged in cruelty. Ethan watched her leave, but the smug satisfaction he'd expected to feel never came. Instead, a cold heaviness settled in his gut. "That was harsh, even for you." Jackson appeared at his side, his voice low and sharp with disappointment. "It was honest," Ethan muttered, but the words felt like ash. "Was it?" Jackson's tone hardened. "Because the woman I just watched own this room didn't look like someone who needed a reality check." Before Ethan could form a response, Lila reappeared at the edge of the circle. She had composed herself, but he could still see the raw hurt behind her eyes. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice slightly unsteady, "might I have a word with you privately?" The group instinctively backed away, giving them space they hadn't earned the right to invade. Ethan followed Lila to a quieter corner just off the hotel's marble lobby, away from the noise and the light. "You heard?" he asked. It wasn't a question. Lila unclasped her earrings, modest pearls that shimmered in the overhead light, and set them gently on the edge of a nearby table. "You wanted to see how the help would handle a real social event. Congratulations, Ethan. You've shown everyone exactly who you are." "Lila, look." "No, you look." Her voice rose, then faltered as she caught herself and glanced around, lowering it again. "I've worked for you for 2 years. 2 years of staying late, of fixing your calendar, of making sure you looked competent to your clients and investors." Ethan said nothing, but something clenched in his chest. "I never complained when you ignored me or when you forgot basic human decency. I told myself it was business." "It is business," he said quietly. "This changes everything." Her voice cut through him. "You didn't bring me here because you respected me. You didn't offer me a promotion because you believed I was ready. You brought me here to humiliate me in front of your world." "Lila," Ethan started, but the truth had already landed. It was exactly that. "Do you know what the worst part is?" Lila continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "For just a moment tonight, when we were dancing, I thought you might actually see me. Not your assistant, not someone beneath you, but me. I thought maybe you were different than I believed." She picked up her small clutch purse, checking to make sure she had everything. "I was wrong," she said simply. "About you, about tonight, about believing that working hard and being loyal might actually mean something." Ethan watched her turn toward the exit, panic rising like a flood. "Lila, wait. Don't leave like this." She paused, glancing over her shoulder one last time. In the soft lighting of the hotel lobby, she looked like something untouchable, graceful, radiant, nothing like the woman who fetched his coffee and made sense of his calendar. "Goodbye, Mr. Caldwell. I hope your joke was worth it." And then she was gone, walking through the St. Regis's ornate doors and vanishing into the New York night. Ethan stood alone in the marble lobby, still in his custom tux, the muffled sound of laughter and string music drifting from the ballroom behind him. His colleagues were likely still chuckling over the stunt, but all he could hear was the way Lila had said his name on the dance floor. Not Mr. Caldwell, but Ethan, like he was someone worth knowing, worth trusting. Jackson found him there 20 minutes later, still staring at the entrance. "The car service called," Jackson said quietly. "She asked them to drop her at a subway station instead of her place. Paid cash, walked off." Ethan nodded, unable to speak. "She left these." Jackson held up the pearl earrings Lila had taken off earlier and placed on the table. "Figured you'd want to return them." Ethan took the earrings, surprised by the weight in his palm. "Did you know?" "Know what?" "Who she really is. The Bennett family. Those emeralds she was wearing, those weren't costume jewelry." Jackson was quiet for a long moment. "I suspected something. The way she handled the international mergers, how she always knew the right questions to ask in global board meetings. But I figured if she wanted to keep her background private, that was her choice." "She's been playing assistant for 2 years, Ethan said, laughing bitterly. "She could have bought out my entire portfolio 10 times over." "What have I done?" "What you always do," Jackson replied, his tone harder than Ethan had ever heard it. "You find something good and crush it because you're terrified it might actually matter." Ethan wanted to deny it, but no words came. Jackson was right. From the moment Lila had walked into the ballroom like a queen, Ethan had felt something shift inside him, something real, and that terrified him more than any hostile takeover ever could. So he'd done what he always did when something real showed up. He'd burned it down. And now, staring at the pearl earrings in his palm, he realized he might have destroyed the one thing he couldn't afford to lose. Back inside the ballroom, the gala played on. Champagne flutes clinked, gowns swept across the dance floor. The city's elite whispered about the mogul who brought his secretary as a date. But Ethan Caldwell stood alone in the lobby, holding a pair of earrings, wondering if some mistakes were simply too big to undo. In a taxi heading toward Soho, Lila Bennett Hartwell finally allowed herself to cry. Not for the embarrassment or the laughter, but for the moment on the dance floor when she dared to believe Ethan Caldwell might actually be someone worth loving. She'd been wrong before. But this felt like the worst mistake yet. Ethan stared at the email on his laptop, rereading it for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Lila's resignation was brief, professional. Exactly what he'd expect from someone who spent 2 years managing his chaos with unflinching precision. "Dear Mr. Caldwell, please accept this letter as my formal resignation from the position of personal assistant, effective immediately. I will ensure all pending projects are properly documented and transferred. Thank you for the opportunity to work at Caldwell Ventures. Sincerely, Lila Bennett." No mention of the gala. No outburst. No blame. Just clean, measured distance, which somehow made it feel worse. "She's not answering her phone," Jackson said, stepping into the office uninvited. "Her building says she moved out yesterday. Paid her lease in full, no forwarding address." Ethan leaned back in his chair, dragging a hand through his hair. "I need to find her." "Why?" Jackson asked. "So you can apologize and feel better about yourself?" "So I can explain." "Explain what?" Jackson's voice sharpened. "That you brought her to the most high-profile gala in Manhattan as a joke? That you humiliated her in front of half the business world?" "She heard you, Ethan. There's nothing left to say." Ethan walked to the window, staring at the skyline where Lila had disappeared. "I made a mistake." "No, you made a choice," Jackson replied. "Now you get to live with it." "I can fix this." "Some things can't be fixed. Some people can't be replaced." As if to prove the point, Ethan's temporary assistant knocked. Jennifer Walsh, punctual, polite, but in 3 days had already double-booked 2 calls and forgotten lunch for a client meeting. Tasks Lila had once handled without effort now seemed monumental. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "your mother called again about the foundation dinner. She needs your final head count." "Handle it." "She asked to speak with you directly, and I'm not." "Just handle it," Ethan snapped, then winced. Jennifer wasn't Lila, That wasn't her fault. The guilt settled quickly, tightening across his chest like a vice. Every irritated word he had ever barked at Lila without thanks, every late night she stayed to clean up his mistakes, now all he had left were echoes and regret. When she left, he turned to Jackson. I need to know more about the Bennett family. Ethan? I'm not stalking her. I just need to understand who she really is. Jackson sighed and pulled out his phone. I may have done a little digging already. For the next hour, Jackson laid it out. The Bennett empire was even more powerful than Ethan had imagined. Lila's father, Emmanuel Bennett Hartwell, had built a global business from a single shipping vessel. But 5 years ago, a corrupt partner vanished with nearly $500 million, and the family had been fighting to stay afloat since. That's when Lila came to New York, Jackson explained. She's been sending money home to support her brother through law school. She's also been trying to prove she could do something on her own. Ethan sat down, visibly shaken. She's been supporting her family while I treated her like a prop. You didn't mean. Yes, you did, Jackson said bluntly. That's exactly what you meant. He shut his laptop. So what are you going to do now? Ethan stared down at his desk, hands curled into fists. There were no excuses, just a painful clarity. She had walked into his world with humility, and he had answered with mockery. Before Ethan could answer, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Darling, Jennifer says you're handling the foundation dinner yourself. How very unlike you. Is something wrong? Even she knew something wasn't right. 3 weeks later, Ethan had his answer. He wasn't going to do anything, because there was nothing to do. Lila Bennett Hartwell had vanished. Her apartment was rented out, her number disconnected. Every lead dried up. He'd even driven to the coastal town where Jackson said her brother might be in his residency, but the hospital wouldn't confirm anything. A private investigator came back with this. Sophia Rodriguez, sorry, Lila Bennett, has professional-level skills at disappearing. Ethan sat in his office, rereading another email from Jennifer about a calendar issue when she knocked on the door. Mr. Caldwell, the board members are arriving for the quarterly meeting. What meeting? Jennifer blinked. The board meeting you scheduled for this afternoon. It's been on your calendar for 2 weeks. Ethan checked. Sure enough, it was there. Lila would have reminded him, prepped his documents, ordered lunch. Jennifer had assumed he'd handle it. Right? The board meeting. Ethan grabbed his jacket. Are the conference rooms set up? I assumed you were handling that. He closed his eyes, counted to 10. Get the Cascade room ready. Order lunch from the Italian place on Pine. Which one? There are 3 on Pine. The one we always use. I'm not sure which that is. Of course she wasn't. Lila had handled everything so well that Ethan had never noticed the details. He was about to respond when the elevator doors opened and board members began filing in. He straightened his tie, ready to bluff his way through another meeting, until he saw her. Lila stepped off the elevator behind them, wearing a navy suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Her hair was slicked back, her eyes sharp. She looked every bit the executive she had hidden for 2 years. But the chill in her gaze cut deeper than any silence. It didn't just pass over him, it erased him. But it was her eyes that struck him most. They didn't even register him. Good afternoon, everyone, Lila said, addressing the board. Shall we move to the conference room? Ethan stood frozen. Lila walked past him without a glance. Jackson appeared beside him, face unreadable. Surprise, he said. Meet Caldwell Ventures' new director of international strategy. Ethan stared at her, his former assistant, now his equal. Leading a meeting he hadn't even prepared for. How? He asked, barely above a whisper. The board was impressed by her performance at the gala. They did their own background check, made her an offer. She starts today, she works for me now. Jackson's voice was calm, but Ethan could barely register the words. She works for the company, same as you. Lila had reached the door to the conference room. For just a moment she looked back at Ethan, her expression unreadable. Coming, Mr. Caldwell? She asked, her tone perfectly neutral. The board is waiting. Ethan followed her in, a sense of cosmic irony weighing down his steps. 3 weeks ago, Lila Bennett Hartwell had been his invisible assistant. Now she was his colleague, his equal, and possibly the board's favorite new hire. And she looked at him like he was a stranger, which, Ethan realized bitterly, he had always been to her. The difference now was that he was finally beginning to understand just how much he'd lost. 6 months had passed since Lila's unexpected return to Caldwell Ventures, and the company had undergone a quiet revolution. Under her leadership, the International Strategy Division had closed 3 major deals in Central America, expanded their footprint across European markets, and increased company profits by 15%. She was brilliant, and everyone saw it. Ethan watched from his office as Lila led a video call with clients in Barcelona, switching between English and Spanish with fluid ease as she discussed quarterly performance goals. She commanded the room not because of wealth or pedigree, but because of pure ability. The problem was, she treated Ethan like he didn't exist. Their interactions were reduced to necessary communication, delivered with icy professionalism that stung more than open hostility ever could. In meetings, she called him Mr. Caldwell. Her emails were brief and dry. At company functions, she never so much as acknowledged his presence. It was slowly driving him mad. "You're staring again," Jackson said, stepping into his office with coffee in hand and a pointed look. "I'm reviewing cross-departmental metrics." "Sure you are. That explains why you've attended 3 leadership workshops in the last 4 weeks." Ethan shut his laptop, no longer bothering to pretend. The workshops were part of a slow transformation. He was trying to become someone better, someone Lila's quiet strength had made him want to be. He now said please and thank you. He remembered birthdays, started actually listening to employees. The effort felt awkward, even performative, but it was real. Watching Lila engage with everyone from interns to executives had shown Ethan how much he'd overlooked. She made people feel seen. He never had. "Jennifer quit yesterday," Ethan muttered, referring to the 4th assistant he'd gone through since Lila's promotion. "What happened this time?" "She said I was impossible to work with and would rather go back to litigation support." Ethan rubbed his temples. "Apparently I'm demanding, vague, and emotionally unavailable." Jackson let out a low laugh. "Sounds accurate. It's not funny. She made the job look easy, and let's face it, she was never just an assistant." Ethan looked toward the glass-walled conference room where Lila was wrapping up her call. "I need to talk to her." "Bad idea. I need to apologize, for real this time. To explain." "Ethan," Jackson's tone turned serious. "She's moved on. She's dating that trauma surgeon from Harborview. She's excelling in her new role. She's clearly happy. Leave her alone." The mention of Lila's boyfriend landed like a punch to the gut. Dr. Daniel Myers, kind, dependable, the kind of man people trusted immediately. Ethan had seen them together at the company's holiday party, and the quiet warmth between them made him want to break something. "I know about Daniel," Ethan said quietly. "Then you know she doesn't need your apologies to move forward with her life." But Ethan wasn't thinking about what Lila needed. He was thinking about the upcoming corporate retreat scheduled for the San Juan Islands. A 3-day strategy session where all department heads would collaborate on long-term planning. 3 days. 72 hours in close proximity to the woman who now lived rent-free in his mind, challenging everything he thought he knew about himself. He told himself it was about professional collaboration, about resolving departmental friction. But deep down, he knew it was about the hope of one unscripted moment, a chance. Maybe Jackson was right. Maybe he should let her be. But as Ethan watched her end a call, smiling with that same calm brilliance that had won over the entire board, he knew he wasn't ready. The San Juan Islands in October were breathtaking. Golden late autumn light, crisp air, and the kind of serene beauty that made people believe in fresh starts. The company had booked a rustic retreat center on Orcas Island, complete with waterfront lodges and collaboration spaces. Ethan had dreaded this trip for weeks. But as he sat in the main conference hall, listening to Lila present the International Strategy Division's 5-year growth plan, he found himself genuinely impressed. She turned what should have been a dry, data-heavy report into a powerful, forward-looking vision. "Questions?" Lila asked, clicking to the final slide. "How confident are you in the Brazil forecasts?" asked Carol Hastings from marketing. "Very," Lila replied. "I've cultivated strong partnerships in São Paulo and Rio over the past year. The preliminary agreements we've secured offer a competitive advantage." Ethan raised his hand. "What about political risk? Currency swings could seriously impact margins." Her eyes met his, for the first time in months. I've built contingency plans into every forecast. All models account for a 15% variation in currency and 3 levels of political disruption. Risk matrices begin on slide 12 if you'd like to review. Her tone was cool, measured, but Ethan caught a flicker beneath it. Annoyance? Disbelief that he'd question her prep work? I'm sure it's thorough, he offered quickly. It is. She moved on, but Ethan couldn't stop watching her. How she owned the room in a charcoal gray suit, her hair pulled back to reveal subtle diamond studs that caught the late light. She wasn't the woman he remembered. She was the woman he had refused to see. And now she was here, undeniable and unshakable. She looked confident, in control, like the woman she had always been, finally unhidden. That evening, after dinner and group activities, Ethan found himself alone in the lodge's main room, hunched over his laptop, trying and failing to polish the next day's presentation. The fireplace crackled softly, rain tapping the windows in rhythm. It should have felt peaceful. It didn't. Working late? Ethan looked up. Lila stood in the doorway, her blazer replaced by a soft cashmere sweater. She looked younger somehow, less guarded. My presentation's a mess, Ethan admitted. I've been distracted lately. She crossed the room, poured coffee from the carafe. The leadership team expects department heads to be ready. I know. He closed the laptop. You were impressive today. The Brazil expansion's smart, strategic. Thank you. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. Ethan searched for something, anything, to bridge the chasm. The power's going out, Lila said suddenly, watching the lights flicker and vanish. Emergency lights glowed to life, casting a soft amber haze over the room. Generators must be down, she added, settling into a leather chair by the fire. Storms do this out here sometimes. Ethan took the seat across from her, relieved for an excuse to stay. Looks like we're stuck here for a while. Looks like it. They sat in silence, not awkward but comfortable, the kind that only came with shared history. Rain tapped against the windows, and the fire crackled between them. In the dim light, Lila looked like the woman Ethan had danced with that night at the gala, elegant, enigmatic, just beyond reach. Can I ask you something? Ethan said finally. Lila tensed ever so slightly. What? Why did you come back to Caldwell Ventures? You could have worked anywhere. Lila was quiet for so long, Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. But when she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Because I'm good at what I do. And I wanted to prove it somewhere that mattered. Your company has the potential to be more than just profitable, Ethan. It could be meaningful. The use of his first name hit him like a live wire. She hadn't called him that since the gala. You think I've been wasting that potential? He asked. I think you're capable of more than you've shown. The honesty cracked something open in Ethan's chest. I've been trying, he said. The seminars, the way I treat people. I'm learno. Lila's eyes met his across the firelight. People notice? Do you? The question hung heavy between them, packed with years of tension and months of silence. Lila looked away first, fingers tightening around her coffee mug. Ethan, we can't. I know you're with Daniel. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But Lila, I need you to know that what I did at the gala. Don't. Lila stood abruptly, moving to the window. Please don't. Ethan followed, close, but careful not to touch. I was cruel, unforgivably cruel, and I'm sorry. I heard you the first time. When? I never said. You didn't need to. She turned to face him, her expression lit by the soft glow of the emergency lights. I saw it, the way you've been changing, the way you treat people now. You're trying to be better. That says more than any apology. Her words lingered like a fragile bridge, one Ethan didn't dare cross too quickly. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, the room felt warm. Lila, he said softly, I. The lights flickered back to life, breaking the moment. Lila stepped away, her composure returning. I should get some rest, she said, not meeting his eyes. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Ethan watched her go. He'd come closer than ever before. But almost wasn't enough. Some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt overnight. But maybe, just maybe, with time and the right kind of man, there was still a way forward. 1 year after the gala that changed everything, Caldwell Ventures faced its most critical moment. Ethan sat in the emergency board meeting, watching as Jackson laid out the situation. Titan Holdings is offering 30% above market value, Jackson said. Our shareholders are tempted. We have 72 hours to make a counteroffer, or they'll vote to sell. Patricia Wells leaned in. What leverage do we have? Not enough, said CFO George Tanaka. Titan's backed by 3 major funds. Unless we find an investor or strategic partner quickly, we'll lose the company. Ethan felt like the room was closing in. Titan Holdings was notorious for buying up innovative firms, gutting their R&D and laying off staff. Everything he and his father had built, gone within months. There might be another option, Lila said quietly from the far end of the table. All eyes turned to her. In the last year, she had become critical to company operations. Still, Ethan hadn't expected this situation to land on her shoulders. My family's firm has been looking to invest in tech in the Northeast Corridor, she continued, voice steady. The Bennett Hartwell Foundation could provide the capital to match Titan's offer. What will you do? She asked softly. I'm starting a nonprofit, Future Pathways Initiative. Jackson's helping me get it off the ground. Lila's smile, genuine, soft, was the first she'd given him in over a year. That sounds perfect for you. I hope so. They stood quietly in the hallway of Caldwell Ventures, not as boss and assistant, not even as co-workers anymore, just 2 people whose lives had changed in ways they were still trying to understand. Ethan, Lila said just as he turned to leave. Yeah? Thank you. For what? For showing me people can change. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. As he stepped into the elevator, leaving behind the company his family had built, he felt lighter than he had in years. Behind him, Lila Bennett Hartwell stood in the corridor, the keys to her future in her hands, wondering why victory sometimes felt so bittersweet. But that was a thought for another time. Today, she had a company to lead and a future to build. 2 years after Ethan Caldwell walked away from Caldwell Ventures, and Lila Bennett Hartwell became the first black female CEO of a major Manhattan tech firm, their lives had been transformed. But it was the work they did together that had shaped their legacy. The New York Youth Tech Hub buzzed with energy as Ethan adjusted his tie and scanned the crowd. Students from a dozen boroughs mingled with tech executives, educators, and civic leaders. Everyone gathered for one purpose: to bridge the tech gap and provide opportunity. Nervous? Jackson appeared at Ethan's side, straightening his tie. Terrified, Ethan admitted, watching a group of teens demonstrate an app they developed to help senior citizens schedule medical appointments. What if it fails? Then we try something else. That's what you do now, solve problems instead of creating them. Ethan gave a small smile, still adjusting to this version of himself. The Caldwell Foundation had grown into a regional force, offering scholarships, business mentorships, and seed funding for minority entrepreneurs. The work was demanding, but meaningful in ways Ethan had never imagined back when profits were the only priority. Ethan? He turned at the sound of her voice and forgot how to breathe. Lila stood in a navy sheath dress, her hair down in soft curls, smile warm and genuine. Lila, thank you for inviting me. I wouldn't have done this without you, he said, motioning to the packed room. This is incredible. You should be proud. We should be proud. Caldwell's partnership made this possible. Under her leadership, the company had not only recovered, it had flourished. Their partnership had surprised many, but together, they'd created change neither could have achieved alone. How's the engagement announcement going? Ethan asked, the words painful to get out. Lila's smile dimmed. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Before he could ask more, a teen approached with a tablet. Ms. Bennett Hartwell, could you review our projections? We want to make sure it's realistic. Of course, Cameron, she turned to Ethan. Can we talk later? Of course. She was engaged to Dr. Daniel Myers, a fact he'd read in the Times months earlier. The party was next weekend. Ethan had been bracing himself for it. The ribbon cutting began. Cameras flashed, speeches followed. Ethan spoke about second chances and the power of giving back, but his eyes kept drifting to Lila. Her presence felt both grounding and untouchable, like watching a fire you couldn't warm your hands by, but couldn't look away from either. Afterward, she appeared at his side. Walk with me? They stepped into the courtyard, strung with lights that glowed against the October sky. I ended the engagement. The words stopped him cold. What? 3 weeks ago. I broke it off. Lila leaned against the brick wall, vulnerable in a way he hadn't seen since the night of the gala. I couldn't marry him. Why? Ethan asked gently, because I realized I was falling for someone safe, someone who wouldn't hurt me, but also someone I didn't fully love. Ethan stood frozen, barely breathing. Ethan, I spent 2 years resenting you. Then I spent a year watching you change into someone better, someone who cares, someone real. I had a good teacher, he said. Lila smiled. You had the heart. You just needed to listen to it. They stood there, once strangers, once enemies, now equals, both changed by the journey. I don't know if I deserve a second chance, Ethan said. I hurt you. I live with that every day. We both do, Lila said quietly. But I've spent 2 years learning how to lead, and you've spent 2 learning how to love people the right way. Maybe now we can learn what it means to choose each other. Ethan reached for her hand, their fingers laced easily. Are you saying? I'm saying love isn't supposed to be safe, it's supposed to be worth it. Inside, the celebration continued, but outside in the quiet courtyard, Ethan kissed her, and it felt like coming home. So, what happens now? He whispered. Now we see if 2 people who found their better selves can build something lasting. I'd like that, he said. I'd like that too. They walked back inside, hands entwined. The students kept presenting. The parents kept networking. The work continued. But for Lila and Ethan, it was a new beginning. 2 years after a cruel joke nearly tore them apart, they had built something stronger. A love grounded in respect, shared purpose, and the courage to grow. Beneath the twinkling lights of the tech hub, they stepped into the future. Not as boss and assistant, not even as colleagues, but as partners, equals, who had finally learned how to love each other well. Vậy thì, đó là nơi câu chuyện của chúng ta kết thúc. Nhưng nếu bạn vẫn ở đây với tôi, vẫn đang xem hoặc lắng nghe tại thời điểm này, thì có thể có điều gì đó trong hành trình của Lila và Ethan đã chạm đến điều gì đó trong bạn. Có thể bạn đã nhìn thấy một phần của chính mình trong những sai lầm của họ, sự trưởng thành của họ, hoặc khao khát được thấu hiểu của họ. Và nếu đúng như vậy, bạn của tôi, bạn không đơn độc. What we just witnessed wasn't just a love story. It was a story about redemption, about becoming better. Not perfect, just better. About learning that real love, the kind that endures, requires accountability, change, and courage. One of my favorite Stoic quotes by Epictetus says, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that's exactly what Lila did. She was humiliated, she was betrayed, but she didn't crumble. She rebuilt, quietly, powerfully, on her own terms. And Ethan? He learned that remorse isn't enough without transformation. It's what you do after the damage that defines who you are. Another line from Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. That's what Lila lived. She didn't seek revenge, she chose growth. And in doing so, she opened a door not just to success, but to peace. So, if this story stirred something in you, maybe it's time to reflect on your own journey. Who have you become? And who are you still trying to be? If you felt moved, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who might need a little reminder that healing is possible, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this, raw, real, and full of heart. Thank you for staying until the end. You matter. Your journey matters. And maybe, just maybe, the best part of your story is still waiting to be written.